When day one of E3 continues. The show floor is over, but this is the new show floor. I'm joined by just a full, as many guests as we could fit. We've got Lorne Lanning here with me. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great now that I'm here.
Yeah, welcome back.
Well,
good,
thank you.
Good
It's
to
great
have you
to be
back.
here.
We've got from Hangar 13, we've got Haden Blackman. How you doing?
Great.
And Bill Harms down there on the end. How are things?
Fantastic.
Awesome. In the back, we've got Hit Detection's own Jeff Green.
Hi, Jeff.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And we've got Alex Navarro. I don't know.
Yeah, you don't have to intro me or anything. It's cool. I'm just here.
It would just look weird if there was
Yeah.
only one person sitting in the back. So.
I'm literally a body.
Yeah, quite literally.
Yeah.
The body. Anyway, so we're here. Another year of E3. Some stuff being shown off. Obviously, you guys are bringing the games. Mafia here at the show, huh?
That's right.
How does it feel getting that out there in front of people? You know, obviously the game's been announced and known for a while, but you know, kind of being able to really get out there and show it. How's it been going?
It's been great. I mean, you said earlier it was one of your most emotional.
Yeah, I actually got a little emotional today at the booth, and it's like we had the jazz band playing, and it's just we've been working on this for 3+ years now, roughly or thereabouts, and just seeing the booth, seeing all the people, the excitement of everybody lined up, and the jazz band. Yeah, it was this is hands down the highlight of my career so far,
awesome.
which has been great.
Yeah, for me, I mean. Again, I think we all probably can relate to this, but the team has been working kind of, almost in seclusion for so long. And obviously we announced at Gamescom and we were able to show bits and pieces of the game, but to actually have a huge, extended portion of gameplay out there that the team worked so hard on, that to me, I think has been really meaningful. So
yeah,
it's been a great show.
That just helps telling the story of the game and kind of like helping people understand like really what you're making.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. And again, it's just the team's hard work. Being put front and center now is just for me is a big milestone. So.
Yeah, and now Lorne, you've brought plenty of games to E3 over the years.
Well, we're bringing another one, but we weren't on the big floor. We were in a corner somewhere, just trying to find a plug and show the occasional person that would walk by.
It's
much different.
When
I hear that, I hear, wow, they got a great publisher. I'm like, well, we're financing. But we got the, we'll work for game development.
How much of the control do you really want to give away to a publisher?
Well, that
anyway?
was always our problem, I guess.
Yeah.
We had some issues with that through the years, but
I've been there.
Here we are. Yeah. We survived, and here we are.
Yeah.
But we're secretly showing something because we're ahead of where we thought we would be, which is really a first. That's awesome. It was like, wait a minute.
That's not how game development works. You're supposed to be.
You're usually like totally nervous wreck. What you're showing, you hope it doesn't break, but it's shaky.
Yeah.
It's a junk with bubble gum and coat hangers holding your game together, and you're like, it doesn't break. You demo it, but you know how to avoid everything. But it actually was running, so we're like, hey guys, should we show this year? Like we weren't prepared, which is completely the opposite of how it always goes, which is can we wait? No, now's the time. So can't complain, but publicly we're really not out there yet with it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Now, Jeff Green.
Yes, sir.
In your days now as consulting and obviously in the press, how many E3 builds have you broken? Would you say how many times have you crashed a build at a trade show?
Oh, many.
Yeah.
And when I was at EA. As an employee.
Those builds crashed themselves.
Right, of course I did. Right. I crashed many builds. Yeah. I played a bunch of games. Are we talking about games yet? Can we do that?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
You want to talk about some games?
I want to talk about some video games.
Talk about some hits.
All right.
All right.
I detected a couple hits today.
Okay. What are you thinking here? What's
actually, what I really liked was Titanfall 2.
Yeah. Same here.
Did it.
Yeah.
Battlefield 1 looks amazing. It looks great, but I'm not convinced. Do kids even know that there was a World War I? I mean, they know there was a 2.
Oh yeah, 2 is the one that everyone's talking about.
But does anyone know what happened in 1?
There's a whole there are like 3 TV channels devoted to World War II.
Right.
At any given time. 1. That's
they might
that's on shortwave radio. You got to tune that.
Right. They might think it was like Leonard Part 6, where there was
basically
they
started
1
at
through
2.
5. They
But
started at 6.
This could be the moment. Like this could reintroduce World War I to a whole new generation. Like those Kaiser helmets could be huge.
They could. They could replace fedoras as sort of like the thing.
Yes, we're getting way into the pointy helmets.
Totally.
Yeah, obviously.
Also, I was wondering because they didn't show it today when I saw it at EA Play. Are they going to have things like mustard gas and chemical weapons?
Yeah, apparently there are gas masks in that game, and yeah,
That's intense.
It's It's war.
The thing I want to do is fly around in the biplane.
Yeah.
Chuck grenades out, because that's how they used to do bombing runs back then.
Yeah.
And just
Really?
just
It was
kinda-
grenades?
Yeah, they would just throw stuff out of the plane and hope it landed on something.
There's like, I don't know, what do you got up here? I got 2 grenades and a brick. All right, go down. We're doing this. Like, yeah.
It was the E3 build of war. It was just like you hoped it worked.
Yeah. And invariably, you crash the bill.
Yeah, exactly.
You crash the bill. Yeah, that's Titanfall 2 definitely stuck out to me as I really enjoyed the first game, and there's just so many, like, the grappling hook feels so good. We were talking about earlier, that grappling hook feels really good. Just the mode they're showing, I think, is really smart. And
Yes, it is. I think they kind of boned with Titanfall 1. You know, it just like crashed, and I think it might have been the Xbox One's. The fact that it was only on that platform probably didn't help.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, and that's this.
Never had that happen.
You know, it's funny. We started a series where we're looking at old B-roll, where we're pulling, because we're being owned by the same company that owns GameSpot. Like there's the GameSpot tape library goes back to 2000, 2001. The site started in '96, but no one had tapes then. Yeah. And we found some PS2 munches. B-roll like that, and all that early tech stuff, and I had to sit there and go like, wait a minute, this isn't at all. This totally never right, of course, because this was the game that eventually became the other thing.
I never told that story publicly how that footage got there. But if we want to take a minute and share,
Yeah,
Please, I would love to hear.
So this is kind of is it? So there was, without naming names, there was publishers acquiring publishers, and you wound up with partners you didn't have any say in, and all of a sudden they're your partner, and then all of a sudden you find out they're cutting all their budgets, but they're a public company. So you're like, so we just got a partner we don't want, and they're cutting every budget that they say is above this much, and that's only about $7 million below ours. So we're pretty much on the chopping block. It didn't take a genius to figure it out. So I went, wow, well, how do we prevent that? And I was like, well, wait a minute, let's take all the assets. And at the time, you got to remember, PS2, Sony, if you had a dev kit, you had an agreement that said you couldn't release any footage on a PS2. So you couldn't even tell the public what you were doing. And I was like, but I came from aerospace, where we used to do visualization on Star Wars projects, stuff like that. And I was like, we can visualize the footage, and then we can poison pill the budget cut. So we produced all this footage. We said, this is visualization of the PS2 game, but no one else was able to release PS2 footage. So everyone's like, look at all this PS footage. And I saw Dave Perry do it before with Earthworm Jim, and then, the new systems coming out. I was like, wow, he totally rode that. So I'm like taking surfing lessons. And I'm like, okay, this is how we're gonna. So we produced this whole CD of QuickTimes that was basically all the assets that we were building for it, but we pre-rendered it all in 3D Studio Max, and we called it visualizations of the PS2. The next thing, like, Phil Harris is calling, what are they doing? They're not allowed to show this footage. What footage? This isn't off of PS2. This is visualization. It says it clearly like that. What is that? And everyone starts freaking out. But the public company, I mean, I'm talking, we got Newsweek, we got everywhere with that footage, right?
Yeah.
And then, now cut our budget and see what it does to your public stockpile. That's where that footage came from.
Nice.
And that's the story I'm admitting it today.
and I remember at the time that was like I mean, obviously not real, but that was kind of, we got a hold of that and was like, this is like the first PlayStation 2 footage, like outside of like some duck demo,
no one was allowed to show it,
yeah.
right? So we it was really kind of slimy what we did, but we did it. It survived.
Hey, at some point you got to do what it takes,
honest.
right?
It was honest. But we didn't get our budget cut, and we were hearing across the countries of the different developers that were showing up with padlocks on the studio door.
Oh yeah.
So there was a lot of those are just unwritten stories, but we've heard them all.
Yeah,
we all have.
You were saying.
So that's where that footage came from.
Nice. That
why
is super fascinating.
That's why it looks
you
nothing like
the
game.
Yeah. That's and you mentioned that you did spend some time with Lucas. Doing stuff like that. Lucas seemed like a studio that was always up and down. What period of?
I was there for like 13 years.
Okay.
So right through, like, when I first started, they were just transitioning into console. And kind of had been obviously a PC company for so long and really focused on adventure games, and we're just now starting to realize the value of Star Wars and Star Wars games, and then the importance of the consoles. So I was there through that whole transition, and then obviously onto the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 and whatnot. Yeah. So, but yeah, and I think it's like anything. There were lots of ups and downs. I think in the time I was there was probably more ups than downs, but it was. We never had to do anything like that.
Yeah, that just seemed like a really exciting time for that studio. For
yeah,
sure.
well, what's so interesting is it was like every 2 or 3 years it was the new exciting time, right? Like, and it's just, again, because it's cyclical and you go through these changes, right? So I felt like, my last couple years there, Jim Ward came in as president at one point, and that was an incredibly exciting time. And we had Battlefront, and we were working on Force Unleashed and some other stuff. But that wasn't the only exciting time, and it wasn't, there was times before that and there were times after that, I'm sure, right? So it was just, like you said, it's very cyclical. So
yeah. Definitely.
So did you have to be quiet on the ranch?
Do we have to be quiet on the ranch? I don't know. Quiet's the right word. There are definitely areas that it's a beautiful place, right? And it's like I always just say it's deceptively idyllic, right? Because everybody was working really hard up there, right? And we weren't actually on Skywalker Ranch. We were down the road, and then we were at the Presidio.
I was gonna say, was it in like the Marin Tech Center, like out in that spot where Lucas used to be around there?
Yeah, we're off of Lucas Valley Road, which was down the road from Skywalker Ranch. But like Lucasfilm licensing was up at the ranch, and then at one point the animation team was up at the ranch, Lucasfilm Animation. But you go up there and it's beautiful, right? Yeah. And it's like deceptively idyllic because. Once you start talking to people there, they're all, working incredibly hard, right?
Right. But like, look at this beautiful place. No, I don't have time to.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So, but it was. I mean, the window I was there was a really great time to be there because we were growing the kind of games business. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And now, staying in the area in Novato.
Yeah.
Doing Hangar 13.
Hangar 13, yeah.
So this will be Hangar 13's first game, right?
That's right.
Like some of the people. How much of the team was there previously? Because I'm trying to think like games that came out of Novato. Was like the Bureau came out of there?
So we had. It's interesting. So when I was hired to found Hangar 13. What became Hangar 13, and wasn't really sure what I was going to work on. We knew that. I knew that I wanted to work on open world games, and I wanted to work with proprietary tech. Just because that's what I know. That's what the proprietary tech side of it is what I'm most comfortable with. And then after a couple months, we started having the conversation about the Mafia franchise. So when we built Hangar 13, we brought over a bunch of people from the Czech Republic who had worked on Mafia 2. Yeah. So that was a good infusion of folks. And then there were some folks that actually, like Bill, who actually had been working with the brand for a while, and they were kicking around other ideas for Mafia 3. So we brought Bill on board. And then after the Bureau shipped, a handful of folks from 2K Marin came on board. So we grew. And then when LucasArts, kind of folded, because I had worked there for so long, I knew so many people. We went in and we invited invite me. I don't know if that's the right word.
What are you guys doing?
But, hey, here you go. Look in the mail. There's going to be an invite. Come join us. But
RCP, please. We just want to get a good count.
We were able to bring over some folks from LucasArts too. So we actually had these it was a really interesting time because we had these contingent of Czech guys, contingent of Bureau kind of 2K Marin folks, and then Lucas folks, and then new hires or folks that hadn't necessarily worked in it, all colliding at once, and it's like 3 different cultures, and then these one-offs. Sorry, I don't know how else to say. All hitting at once, and we went from a relatively small team to a large team almost overnight. So that was. It was challenging, but I think it worked. It worked out. It worked to our advantage.
Yeah, I think it worked out great. I think when I started, there was maybe 20 people.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Something like that. We took up this tiny little corner.
You were just running, had a quiet Mafia corner where you're like, one of these days we're gonna get.
There's other people in our area who weren't affiliated with us, and then like Haden said, all of a sudden, just over time, in a very short amount of time, suddenly grew out. But I think the culture and everything, it's great. I think we all really gelled and.
Well, it helped because we had the project, right? To rally around. We had that one thing, the Mafia,
and people with different experience. I mean, obviously, the Czech guys, coming in with Mafia 2 stuff. But this seems like a very different game from Mafia 2.
It is and it isn't. And again, some of this is my experience working on Lucas. But one of the things I did when I came in was, how do I put together franchise pillars for the franchise that are media agnostic. So, you know, if we were going to, not saying that we would necessarily, but if we were going to do a comic book or a novel or a movie with the brand, what would it be? So, and there are things like, you know, again, the strong sense of time and place, the kind of idea of like a gifted anti-hero, and that are consistent across all the Mafia games. So we wanted to make sure we nailed that, and the strong story, obviously, that's what the game was known for. But then everybody agreed, like, well, we need to make it more of an open world game. We need to make it more of a, you know, less of just driving from mission to mission and more, you know, exploration.
To keep costs low.
Yeah, that was exactly it. Yeah, I mean, we do joke about that. Like, we could have done anything more ambitious, probably. An open world game for our first title. But, you know,
Now, Jeff, you're a gifted anti-hero yourself.
I am.
Travel
So,
by napalm.
How's the show go for you? Is it kind of just?
It's
Do you have
awesome.
clients that you're working with that you then need to see their games here, or
Sometimes it's a matter, because sometimes we've helped them, you know, figure out what they should show at E3
sure,
or
okay,
not.
yeah.
So in those cases, we see if our advice actually was good or not. Hopefully it is.
Go walk around and go, like,
whoa, that
"Whoops."
was wrong. Fucked that one up. Sorry.
like, no, you guys misread the email. We didn't say this at all.
Actually, we said don't
This is
show
all
that.
wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
But for the most part, usually we just get to check stuff out. So it's awesome because there's like no responsibility at all. Like you guys, like, you know.
No, I've
like a dream job.
I mean, it's not like you guys.
Oh, okay.
You have
All right,
to do so much.
All right.
Because being in the press, I remember E3 was very, very stressful.
Yes.
Right? You got a lot to do, a lot to cover all the time, and it's impossible to see everything. I remember every day would feel like, how is the day over already? Because I've seen like 2 games. How'd that happen? I needed to see like 20 games.
Right.
So now I can just see 2 games, and it doesn't matter. Because I don't have to do anything with the lack of information
That's
that
been
I don't have.
the awesome transition away from like we have to cover every single game to what we're doing,
Right.
because it lets me actually see two or three games in
Right.
a day.
Now the
and
downside
feel
is I
good
don't have a
about
press pass anymore. So if I do want to see something, I have to wait in line like a civilian.
Yeah,
So-
welcome to the
And
rest.
sucks.
Now,
you,
Bill,
you can't play the I'm Lorne Lanning card.
Not at all.
Don't you know who
show
I
that
am?
card.
Who I am.
You're not getting in if you show that card.
Just tell them you're starting a blog. It works every time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what all the kids
If I had a
do.
YouTube channel.
But it's also interesting that even if we didn't like tell them what to show at E3, it's also, you know, a lot of times it's everybody's first look at a game that we've seen for a while, and we, you know, we may have said we think this is promising, or we think people are going to go crazy over this, or maybe you shouldn't show it yet. So it's always interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not predictable, and it's not predictable.
So wait a minute, you're saying as someone who is officially supposed to predict things, that
Yes,
it's not predictable.
predictable.
All right.
Well, you know, the number of times that we've had to, you know, we often get asked to provide a Metacritic, a predictive Metacritic score.
Right, yeah.
And sometimes we'll see these games like when they're basically just like white boxes, you know, and they still want to score.
So you go, 85. I don't know.
Right,
85.
like, we
I
can
gotta
give
go.
you a number.
Yeah.
We can if you really want it, but this number is really bullshit.
Yeah, that's yes.
Well, as long as you say that to them, they can't
Well,
hold
we
it
do.
against you.
I mean, other times we can make a sort of informed decision. You know, there's other, you know, examples.
or concepts, and you know the games that they're using as comps. And all
Right,
that
or
stuff.
there's, you know, it's a franchise, so there's been past versions or whatever. So we can, and, you know, we do have a pretty good record for generally nailing it, but every once in a while we're just being asked to put a number on something that's impossible, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I guess 78.
Yeah, yeah.
78. That sounds good.
That's how I write all my reviews.
Right,
Exactly. So that's where it's got me this far. So whatever. Now, Bill, you also you know, spent some time in the press.
I did.
And we worked together for, was it about 2 weeks?
Yes.
As part of the CNET,
CNET
ZDNet,
GameSpot
yeah,
merger.
the Game Center GameSpot
And
thing.
then we were expelled.
Yeah, that was a weird day. They
was a very weird
they
day.
called us all into an office, and I was convinced that we were the ones getting out.
So what's funny is I was actually late that day.
Oh wow.
We had the staff meeting, and I wasn't going to go. And then I was like, well, you know, I'm the executive editor. I should probably go. And so I walked down there, and I see some people come out, and they were laughing. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this meeting's about, but people were laughing. And then I go in there, and Michael Brown, who was my boss,
Right. Yeah.
goes, well, that's it. They pulled the plug. We're done. And I was just like, okay. And we're here till through the end of Friday. And then I think we had pizza with you guys that day.
Yeah, I think that was, I think
I literally think like we had the most awkward pizza party like in the history of the world.
Well, I mean, I feel like that was such an awkward thing anyway, because it was like, okay, here are these two sites that have kind of not, like been rivals in a lot of ways for a good long time, and now it's like we're being smashed into the same space, and it was just like, all right, I don't know. Like I knew Ricardo. Yeah. Because I'd seen him out at events and stuff like that. Because I was only on console stuff, and most of you guys were covering the PC beat. So.
Well, and you knew Glenn too.
Well, okay, yeah, I know. We know Glenn.
Yeah. In fact, I wrote for your site for a little bit as a freelancer. Yeah. I wrote through Glenn, and I wrote through Brett Rector.
Yeah. So Brett had been previously, because this was in that building on Townsend Street,
right,
in San Francisco, which I believe is cursed.
Well, Zynga's in there now, so
just tear it down and salt the earth.
Sega was in there before, and they're doing.
Did you ever find your way from the parking lot to the office in that building ever?
It was on the roof, and you had to go down.
Yeah.
And then remember the elevators? You had to like go over here and then walk around because it was like some weird pseudo mall thing.
Yeah.
But Brett worked for
Insight.
Zynga
building?
Yeah.
Oh, shit, that building sucks.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
But Brett worked for Insight.
Oh, so he moved downstairs
So
with
he
Sven
was
and
there,
those
and
guys.
he got laid off from there, and he came back. So when we were told that we were laid off, he literally went back to his desk, threw all of his shit in a box, and said, he just said, I can't remember what he said, but it was like this sentence of profanities, and walked out.
Yeah. And that was it.
And that was it.
And then went on to Star Wars Insider.
Yes.
And then I hired him. This is how small the industry is. I hired him
basically.
at LucasArts as an assistant producer later.
And then the next time I saw him was at a Comic-Con where you guys had like this life-size X-Wing on the show floor. And he was there like running around. He's like, "Oh, this is great." So I was like, "Okay," but I love Brett. He's a big hockey guy, so we'd always wear his hockey jerseys, and we'd go to lunch in downtown San Francisco. And there's a hockey player. I think his name is actually pronounced like Satan.
Yeah,
but it's spelled Satan.
I have that jersey.
So like, so we're like walking around, I'm walking around with this dude with like Satan on the back of his back.
Is that how he spells it?
Yes.
That is how it's spelled.
That's kind of an unfortunate name to grow up
I think
with.
I might still have one of the CNET Game Center hockey jerseys.
So
I have one as well.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
My wife and I recently moved about, a month and a half ago, and I found mine. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is like from what? That was 2000? Oh, no,
Yeah,
it was February
99,
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So it was like, holy crap, and it's still in perfect shape.
Yeah, so because I had known Glenn for years at that point, when CNET bought ZDNet,
right.
I went over to his house and got his hockey jersey and wore it to work that day. Because I'd heard about the announcement before I even got into the office. So I'm like, oh, shit. So I went and got it, and it just showed up wearing the Game Center jersey. He's going like, what's up, guys? Let's do this.
So the best part of that is, I don't remember his name anymore. We had this intern on the day that it was announced that CNET was buying ZDNet. He was going on all these game sites and going on the message boards and saying, well, I don't know what the future of ZDNet is. Maybe liquidation? So I had to spend that entire day like emailing everybody and saying, this was our intern. Like, please take this stuff down.
Yeah.
And ban him. So that he can never
We're currently
post again.
beating him, as you do with an intern.
Exactly.
Crushing him into dust. God. Man, wow.
Millennial story.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went back to PC Gamer because before Game Center, I worked at PC Gamer for a couple of years, and then I went back to PC Gamer. So then we were rivals.
Rivals.
Yeah, there was a lot of rivalry going on. And I worked there for a couple of years, and then Rick Goodman, who had a company, Stainless Steel Studios,
Right. Yeah.
made Empire Earth. He knew, because I also wrote comic books on the side, and he knew I knew strategy games because we were buddies from me covering his games, and he just called me one day and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about moving into game development?" And I said, "Yes, I have," and that was over 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Roughly thereabouts. So yeah.
And now, just this huge project now.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now with this guy.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, that has to be like, just exciting, like, especially like being on the ground floor of this smaller team and watching this thing blow up. Like, how many of the ideas from those early days do you see manifest in it now? I mean, obviously, games are iterated. Things change. But how many through lines do you see?
He's laughing because I joke like sometimes I go on my hard drive and like open up old files just so I make myself cry, just because like
I spent months on this.
Story version 18. That was 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. Like Haden said, I think one of the things is like since we knew our project. Like it was, even though we have all these people coming in, it's very easy to rally behind it and say, "Hey, this is the game we're making."
We had a box like that.
Yeah,
boxes are always good. I think. We had some parameters.
And being as an old press guy, now being on the other side and going, "Holy shit!" Like
you realize what an asshole you were.
Oh yeah, no, totally.
We're really good at that shit.
Yeah. Well, my specialty was not being an asshole; was the poker face. So I was the poker.
You still have that?
Yeah, I do. Or
it's the walking out of a demo going.
Or as some people call it, resting bitch face. But yeah, it's like the flip side because you go around and you on the press side and you
Karma,
see
man.
I deserve it. Yeah. But you go
I hate
like
you guys. No, the poker face. You're like, shit, he hates it, man.
Yeah,
He hates it. We've been killing ourselves.
It shows a lot of promise.
Yeah,
that's what I was just gonna say. My thing was it looks promising.
Yes.
That was it looks promising.
Because that implies like if you do enough work to this, it'll get there. But I know this is your submission build. So
that's
next time you send me a scene or whatever, I'm gonna be like, it looks promising.
But I used to get pissed when the developers would ask, "What do you think?" right away.
Right.
I felt too like on the spot. Like I don't want to tell you what I think yet. Like let me think about it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like the developers live with it for a long time, and I've literally just been introduced to it and seen 5 to 10 minutes of it.
Right.
And I'm the kind of I know some people are just like. But I'm the kind of guy who likes to process it a little bit.
Sure.
Right.
And think about it. So, yes. Oh, it looks promising.
Well, and it's also
the other one
sort of
could be good.
Yeah. Well, it's an impossible question, too, because you don't want to say, like, well, it looks like shit, right? Like, you can't, even if you think that, like, you can't say that. So it's just a rough question. I get why you would ask that question.
I've definitely gotten, and I think it's something that's changed, as I think that our end of things has become a little unglued, and it's a little weird out here on this end of things with just the way the traditional press is going,
right.
And kind of it feels like the kind of YouTube, Twitch stuff is rising up to crush the websites the same way the websites rose up to try to crush print.
Right.
What do you mean tried to?
Okay, fine. Crush print.
Yeah.
They're out in Minnesota still doing something.
There's still a magazine.
Okay.
They're still and so, like we're kind of straddling this weird line between those two things in a lot of ways with, as much video stuff as we do now. And it's become less about here's what the publication thinks about this, and it's become a lot more about like, well, here's what I think about it. And it's given me a lot more leeway in situations like that to say things like, this game is 100% not for me. I think that there are interesting things you're doing, but like I wish you the best of luck, but like you're still working on this turn-based strategy game that like you're working on a game that is very much like Dark Souls, which I just can't really connect with, and that's been weirdly liberating to be able to kind of say that sort of stuff, because the fear on the press end, at least with the way it went with me, was you would get asked that question a lot by PR coming out of a demo, and especially EA was really good at it for a really long time of like showing you the games and then just having some publicist kind of standing next to you and go, so what'd you think of this? What'd you think of this? And literally like writing all that down and storing it away somewhere. And at some point it was like, I'm not a consultant. Like I'm not here to do that. Like it's not, I'm here to kind of report on stuff, and I don't want kind of my flip off the cuff thing then weighing in that heavily on a game that I've seen for 9 minutes or
Those
something.
notes went to a dev team that's like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, exactly. And they go like, all these press guys are assholes. They don't get it at all.
Yeah,
exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's a situation that I hate being put in. Even when I like a game, it leads to me going like, and then walking out of the room and going like, that looks fucking great to whoever I saw the demo with or something like that. And yeah, so a little bit of that has changed to where I feel a little more comfortable saying that because it's less about representing a publication and trying to be all things to all people the way that the big websites were and being a little more focused on us as people. Which
it's interesting though the way it's changed because I feel like the question of did you like it from a developer standpoint? At least 10 years ago came from we're working in isolation,
right?
And nobody else is seeing the game, and we know that at least journalists are gamers, right? And that they'll be able to provide some kind of salient input that maybe a PR guy or somebody else from the organization doesn't have that same viewpoint, right?
Right.
And now I think it's maybe a little bit different because we do, as the industry's matured, now we do get a lot of user tests and we get a lot of that feedback earlier.
Yeah.
But I can remember, again, 10 years ago, just being desperate for any kind of not even like positive validation, but just like just tell me what you think because we've been working
on the right track?
And we don't know. Like you lose sight of is it even good anymore because you're in the weeds on it?
Do you worry these days that because there's so much feedback about unreleased games coming in at all times, do you worry? At some point does it feel like you're just focus testing everything to death? Even if you're not running a focus test, like if you're looking at all that feedback on what you're working on, do you worry that it can poison the process?
Yeah, it depends on when you do it, right? Like I think, I'm not a big fan of doing focus tests early in the process, like this concept, right? Does this concept resonate? Because nobody knows. Or does this feature set resonate? And people don't. You don't know what features you want sometimes and you can't articulate it necessarily as a consumer what features you think are missing until they're there, right? Or whether or not a feature is going to work when you're looking at a one sheet. So I think that part of the process I'm not really supportive of. But later in the process, even where we're at right now, right? Yeah. As we're in kind of the final stages, obviously, to release in October. But so we're looking at, how many bugs can we fix and trying to get as many, meaningful bugs done. But we're also still doing user testing to tune and stuff, and that's absolutely invaluable. And I don't think it poisons the process at that point because we already kind of know what we are and we know what the strengths and weaknesses of the game are, and now it's just about how do we capitalize on the things that we know are really strong, and how do we improve upon the things that on the tuning side or whatever that we know need that help. But we need that feedback because we're so close to it. We can't be objective, right? So we need those. We need people to come in and sit down and play the game. So I really value it from that standpoint. But it's all about the timing of when you do it and how wide you go and who gets that information. And you don't want to send the team into a tailspin if something comes back negative, right?
Right.
Or the converse, right? You don't want, if something comes back really positive, you want to okay, well, our job's done, right? It's like, well, no, we still, there's probably still stuff we can work on.
Or you get people that are just taking that data and just using it to try to win arguments about a game, I imagine.
And
that's probably where you come in a lot, where a team will have an argument and you step in and go no, it's a console MOBA. Make a console MOBA.
Yeah, that is.
You just come in and say that every time, right?
We actually won't know what the conflict is. In fact, we may not even know there is a conflict. We'll maybe figure it out while we're there.
Yeah.
The publisher will bring us in, and they'll, they don't tip their hands at all, which is good. They'll say, "Come and look at this game," and then when we're playing it, we'll play it for a few days. And it's usually on that last day, then someone on the marketing, whatever, will call us in and say, "So what do you think?" And then it becomes okay, they were trying to get something specific out of us.
Right.
And often it will turn out that maybe we actually do agree with them, right? And so they will use that to sort of buffer the argument. But other times it's the other, goes the other way, and we think the developers were right. So sometimes we are settling conflicts without realizing that that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And how often do you ever get into just recommending features of this would, because I hear that a lot, that that there are people if this only had this one feature, because this is very now and very with it, this, it has to have PvP, it has to have this.
How many grappling hooks have you suggested recently?
Right, because we're seeing a lot of them out there, and it's awesome. I'm with you. If you want my consultant's opinion, PayPal me $9 and I will write back, put a grappling hook in your game.
We just have a bullet we put in every report.
But has there been, obviously trends happen in this business? And,
sure. Well, one trend that has come up a lot, over the last 2 years that I've been there is when they ask us about PR and marketing is, they ask us a lot more about Twitch and YouTube than they did before. And a lot of our recommendations are around that, you know, as opposed to where it would have been about the press.
Right.
You know, how do we reach the YouTube guys? How do we get Twitch to stream it? You know,
pay them. Like it's literally,
That is what they
they
do,
have
right.
like
You know,
just
and
give them 10 grand and they do the 20 grand for some of them, and that's the answer.
That's
Again,
the answer.
PayPal me $9 for this consultant. Now, Lorne, you seem like the sort of guy that would want to go against almost all of that.
But no,
you seem like
I'm the kind of guy that wants to learn more about that, you know, and be smarter and less pained along the way. But I think it all kind of goes to all the points being made. But at the same time, if there's an inherent vision of something original, you're not going to get a focus test that says this is what we want.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
They don't know
Yeah,
yet.
100%.
And I think what happens is it's the same thing in Hollywood. The bigger the budget, and then now you basically, you know, it's real simple, right? The bigger the budget, you got public companies involved, you got shareholder concerns, you got all kinds of different divisions trying to ensure the safe bet. So what is that? Those are summer blockbuster, tentpole, mediocre films, right? And we see it all the time in games. It's the same thing. And what's happening? A lot of times they go, you are going to be in charge of the vision of this, you know, branded license, right? And someone goes like, I'm going to be? Yeah. And now all of this upper echelon is going to tell you how to make it great, you know. And so we wind up with a lot of things that kind of, they don't have the heart that of someone who would have been like at different times. I find myself like, look, I get none of you believe in it, right? But it's going to work. But we got to at least get to here before these things can prove it. And the reason you don't believe it is because you never played it before, you know. And I can get that. So you got to, no matter what, if it's a big brand you're working with, the bigger the budget it is. I mean, it's easier for us today because we're indie.
Right.
We're not going to lose anyone else's money. We'll go broke. But so you're responsible for your own decisions. And at the same time, that actually made me, I think, better in terms of sticking less to your own vision specifically and listening more. And in the beginning, you're borrowing money. You're really out on a limb. You got to be right, and you're being told, look, you got to kill it this time. You got to kill this E3, and you're like, oh God, it's not running, you know, or whatever it is. And so a lot of things happen. We've seen it blow back on a lot of designers. I totally understand the spots they were in. They said the wrong thing, don't follow through. They get crucified. It happens. But you got to have, whether it's a team, you know, Pixar had a great saying. Ed Catmull, who I think was a cultural genius in terms of keeping cultures together and figuring out how to make, in his word, art a team sport. And that's really games too, you know, is that it's less about an individual director, but there has to be a vision. And if that vision is retained by a committee, it's got to be a really good small committee. And a few weak eggs there, like what happens all the time, you get an acquisition, just to ramble a bit on it, right? You get an acquisition, and then the buying company, depending on how wise they are or not, sends in a mediocre lackey to now be in charge of that whole company that they just bought. And now that guy, he's terrified to make a decision, so now he wants a consensus. So you get the camel out of the committee design, right? Even though the people there be like, look, man, I'm telling you what to do. Okay, I got these awards on the wall, you don't, but you're going to listen to them now because you don't know the decision to make, and that's the game we're going to deliver. Thank you very much for wasting 3-4 years of my life.
There are a lot of people out there that are.
You don't sound bitter at all.
No. And I'm the guy who always had creative freedom, you know, which is kind of like, well, you know, that can bite you in the butt too.
You end up in a position where there are a lot of people in those decision-making roles that are really just afraid to lose their job.
Yeah, you know, it's an expensive world.
Yeah,
I can understand.
I feel like, I totally get it. But
there's a fear. The more money there is, the more fear there is around a project. The project comes to the show and gets promoted as though, look at how excited we are. But half of it is, look how terrified we are. You better get the right reception. We'll fund the stuff, you know. And there's all different spectrums of how big it gets. But basically, the more money's involved, then the more fear is going to. I think, you know, we'd agree, the more fear orbits around the project, which means the core group, like you talk about 4 teams coming together, right? What a cultural, you know, orgy that was, right? Yeah. It's like, and you can imagine how tense that can be because there's lots of different fears that will emerge, egos that will emerge. But when you can synergize a vision and you have a few people who are like, look, we no matter what the bank or what this, we have to agree that we're going to make the decisions based on what's best for the player, right? At the end of the day, and we're going to hear all these voices, but we're going to have to sift through and you know and really try and figure out what's what's reactionary, what's overreactionary, what's on, what should we listen to, where do we need to be smarter, how close are we to it, and how little do we actually know about our own game now? Because to their points, you're way too close.
Yeah.
Which is, these are all common. How do you work on some 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, year after year?
Especially if it comes together right at the end.
And have clarity, and it doesn't work most of the project, is most of the cases.
But it seems like Hangar 13 is a different kind of studio from hearing about it.
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, again, part of it is, part of it's 2K, right? Like when I decided to join 2K, I really wanted to go to a place that made games that I like to play and that had a string of high quality titles, right? So at the time, there was Borderlands, which BioShock, and these other titles that I was really a huge fan of. So
and even to just like around that time, like even to just some riskier, like a Spec Ops: The Line, and some fascinating stuff. You're like, okay, this is something that like most big publishers you wouldn't think would even.
Well, right.
Do
I mean, you look at Borderlands, right? Borderlands is like it's not a risky title, right? Like that. I mean, between the art style and the fact that 4-player co-op and all that, like there was a risk there, which was exciting to me, and that was one of the things that drew me there. So I think part of it's 2K as a publisher, has given us, I think, Mike, keep losing it, has given us a lot of freedom. But at the end of the day, I always feel like I have the weight of the company at my back instead of the weight of the company on top of me, which is, I don't think is always the case in the industry. So it's not that they're not pushing, because they are, right? And it is a big project, and it's obviously we want it to do well, and so you feel, but it feels like everybody's pushing the same direction. And I think for me, the thing that has kept me really going is the fact that even though we have disagreements sometimes, right, and not everybody. We can disagree about what we need to do to make the game great, but at the end of the day, everybody is focused on not what was my idea that won, it was how do we make the game great. So that to me, I think, is what's really valuable. And then again, I think because we had those crush of culture, and again, not just like game development cultures, but like world cultures, right? And understanding that those things were all kind of colliding at once, and that the way that things worked at LucasArts was different than the way they worked at, on the Bureau, which was different than the way it worked at 2K Czech, and different than the way I wanted to work, and different than the way some of the guys we hired worked. We had to very quickly say, this is who we are, and this is what game we're building. Otherwise, it would have all fallen apart, right? Because we've got everybody pulling in different directions. Right. So I think almost like, and again, I was like deer in the headlights, to be honest, right? Like, but we had to rally the team around that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived the first 3 or 4 months together, right? Because it was, slamming all these people.
And now you're at E3 showing a game that looks promising.
No,
it's talking to the people that have seen it. It sounds like you guys are on the right. See, now I can't even say anything actually positive, but that sounds like a dick. We're gonna wrap it up. Phil, Haden, Lorne, Jeff, Alex, thanks for hanging out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming by. Let's do this again next year.
Right on.
This is awesome.
Yeah, good to see you. We'll be back. We got more guests coming up. Stay tuned.